This is your trigger warning, everybody. So I do these videos, I record these videos, and then I edit them afterwards. And so I was editing this current video that you're going to be watching, hopefully in a few seconds. And I hope you will watch it because it's, I think, a good video. It's a really good lesson. But I say the word right in there probably 300 times. So I'm going to put up a right counter because I want to note every single time I say them. It's a new habit. I've been getting excited, and the more excited I get, the more I say right, because I'm kind of just confirming what it is that I say. So just be warned, over the next 30 minutes, you are going to watch me say right, probably more than you hear me say anything else. Good luck, God bless, and thank you for watching. Hey, welcome to Bible 365. So time check. I always love to do a time check because it's summer, but it's like getting to the end of summer. So time check, day check. Today is day 230, which puts us at August 17th, and it is 8:15. So I have my light on because it's going to get dark real quick. But it's also cicada season, so I'm crazy excited about that because you get to hear them like madness all over the place. Okay. If you are joining me for the first time, I am your host, and I am Kathy Carter. I am reading through the Bible in 365 days, which is why this is called Bible 365. And I'm reading the Bible using the chronological Bible reading plan, and it's from oneyearbibleonline.com. So you would go on, download chronological, make sure it's chronological, free printable reading plan. And you come up with that, and today is day 230. So if you are joining me and you have never seen this before, go do that first. Look where we are on day 230, right? If you can read it, I would love that, because I always love if you read first. And then come and join me, because it's really, in some ways, it could be really confusing, especially if you're reading it for the first time. So we are Ezekiel 5 through 9, and this is a prophet. So Ezekiel is a prophet in the nation of Babylon. So he is an Israelite, but he's in Babylon. Very tiny bit of background is Babylon is this massive nation over in the Middle East area in the year like 590s, right? And they have taken over the entire, I mean, really the entire world in that area. So they didn't take over Egypt, but they had like this huge portion of the Middle East area. And Judah was one of those areas. And so what they did was they took out like Assyria and all these other nations, and they left like this. Jerusalem is there, teeny tiny nation, little town. It's probably not that little, but Jerusalem and some surrounding towns are there. But for the most part, people have been taken out, and things are not going very well for the people in Judah. And there are some prophets that are crying out to them, and they had said, "You're going to be taken." Remember, Jeremiah said, I want you to give yourself up, right? It's time to surrender. So we have Jeremiah that was over in the nation of, actually in Judah. And then we have Ezekiel, who has seen the Lord, and he is over in the nation of Babylon. And so we're just really with Ezekiel today, and we're going to see what God has to show him. This is becoming my favorite book. It's not because it's like hopeful or inspiring or any of those things, which I guess in some ways might be a little bit like twisted of me, but it's because he's showing us so much of a picture of who God is. And everything that we have read up until this point really shows us the truth of God. So we have read things from thousands of years before right now, and those things are starting to come true, right? And he's using some of this terminology. And so we're starting to see some of these things. And so I want to dig into this. So like I said, we are in Ezekiel 5 through 9, August 17th. I think I said it at least once, but I always want to let you know what the date is. All right. So he says, "Now, son of man." So again, this is in like the 590s. Ezekiel 5:1. "Now, son of man," so which is what he calls Ezekiel, and I'm going to venture a guess that it's sort of like a title. So he doesn't seem to call him by his name, and he doesn't. So when we hear him talking to Jeremiah, he's just like, he doesn't call him anything. He just says, "Go tell the people," right? So he's not really calling him by a name. So there's something very particular in Ezekiel that he's giving him this title, Son of Man. Is he something special and unique? I believe he is. I believe that's why he's getting this title. I feel like it's like a capitalized title, like he's the Son of Man. So he's sort of like the overall son that the Lord has of man that's sort of like announcing these things to men. take with it what you will, right? Why else is he calling that? I don't know. There could be other reasons. And I always love to hear that. Now, son of man, take a sharp sword and use it as a razor. You're going to shave your head and your beard, which is one of those things, by the way, that they don't normally do. So this might seem a little bit not that big of a deal. So what? He shaves his head. We shave our heads all the time. It is a big deal in the nation of Israel. They, as men, were meant to grow these things. They were growing. They grew their hair, right? They said you're never supposed to, which if we see some very Orthodox Jewish people, so, quite often you see those curls that would come down, and it's because they're not supposed to cut those, right? And so they're not supposed to shave their beards, and because it's this sign of respect. They're supposed to be covered, right? This is the covering, is a respectful covering for the Lord. And this goes back to like Leviticus and Deuteronomy. So if you not necessarily understand what that means and you're interested, go back to those areas and go read those and see what they have to say about that. So when you shave it, there's a purpose right to it. And so sometimes they would shave it to take those Nazirite vows, right? So they would shave their heads and then they would just let it grow and grow and grow and grow and grow until their Nazirite vow was over. And then they would shave their head once that vow was over to show that that vow has been completed. And then they shave their heads, right? So there's always a point and purpose to this, seeming like nothing, but definitely a sign of honor and respect to the Lord. Okay, so he says to shave your head, not what they would want to do. So he says to Ezekiel, shave your head, and then you're going to divide up your hair. And it looks like it's dividing it up into 3, but it's really dividing it up into 5. So it's dividing it up like this. It's saying, take a third of it, and it says, burn a third of the hair inside the city, right? So when your siege comes to an end, burn a third of it. Take a third and strike it with a sword all around the city, and then scatter a third of it to the wind. So those are like your 3. But then he also says, take a few hairs and tuck them away in the folds of your garment, and take a few of these and throw them into the fire and burn them up, right? A fire is going to spread to all of Israel. So once again, he's using these prophets to do something extremely literal. I can hear the neighbor's dog, but I don't think my dog's out here. He's taking the prophet to do something extremely literal in order to show the picture of what he's going to do to the nation. This is how he tends to prophesy. He says, this is what the sovereign Lord says. This is Jerusalem, which I have set in the center of the nations, with countries all around her. Yet in her wickedness she has rebelled against my laws and decrees more than the nations and the countries around her. She has rejected my laws and has not followed my decrees. The nations around her were not lifted up. They were not set in a nation that wasn't their own. They were not given the love of the Lord living with them. They were not given the laws and the decrees that the Lord gave to them to keep them as a community protected, safe, and loved, right? And yet they are following the Lord more than the nation that was given those things. I say these things, and I really deem that they're important because of the way I see ourselves. And I don't always think that one thing directly translates to another, right? And I want to be really clear about that. It doesn't always translate. Sometimes it's just learning more about the Lord, right? But in this, I think very clearly, like those who have followed for a significant period of time, and this is myself, this is me, right? I have been given God's laws and decrees. How am I using those gifts? They're gifts. How have I been using those gifts that I have been given, right? Am I using those to say, Lord, you give me grace for all the sin that I do? Or, Lord, I'm just not feeling strong enough to do that right now, right? Or am I repenting of the things that I do that are against him and turning towards him and away from the sins that I want to commit? Right? There is a difference in the way in which we follow the Lord. Has the gift been given to you or hasn't it been given to you? And if it has been given to you, how do you honor that gift? How do you recognize the worthiness of that gift? Because we did not deserve that gift. And so do you recognize that you haven't been deserved that, right? That you didn't deserve that gift. And I say that because like we can really easily say like, oh, I don't deserve that gift, but I'm not going to forgive that person. Did you deserve forgiveness or didn't you deserve forgiveness? Are you to bestow forgiveness that's undeserved or aren't you to bestow forgiveness that's undeserved, right? Like these are the things that we as believers and followers should be wrestling with. They were not wrestling with those things. The neighbors were wrestling with those things more than the people inside the nation of Israel who had been given these gifts were wrestling with those things. And so he's obviously really upset with them. And he says, therefore, I myself am against you. I'm going to inflict punishment on you in the sight of all the nations because of your idols. I'm going to do to you what's never been done before, and that will never do again. Therefore, in your midst, parents will eat their children, and children will eat their parents. I'm going to inflict punishment on you. I myself will shave you. So again, we're seeing how this is defiling them. It's making them unclean and unworthy, right? I'm going to shave you. Verse 12, a third of your people will die of the plague or perish by famine inside you. A third will fall by the sword outside your walls, and a third I will scatter to the winds and pursue with drawn sword. Then my anger is going to cease and my wrath against them will subside. I will be avenged. And when I have spent my wrath, they will know that I, the Lord, have spoken. So they're going to, after this all happens, then they're going to know that I have spoken. So what I want to pull out here is I want to pull out Deuteronomy 28. This is the beauty of reading what we've read already and being able to go back. And this is why I go back and I don't go forward. So here's what he says. Deuteronomy 28, because this is what we're going to see of the nation. So remember what it says. It says, your people are going to die by plague or famine, sword outside the walls. I'm going to scatter them in the wind, right? And then my anger will cease, right? But I'm going to bring famine on you and cut off your supply of food, right? All of these things. If we go back to Deuteronomy 28, it says in verse 15, however, now Deuteronomy 28 was from Moses, 1500 BC. We're now in 590-ish BC. 1,000 years before that. He says, however, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I'm giving you today, all these curses will come on you. You're going to be cursed in the city, cursed in the country. Your basket and your kneading trough will be cursed. The fruit of your womb will be cursed. Verse 30, you will be pledged to marry a woman, but another is going to take her. Verse 32, your sons and daughters will be given to another nation. Verse 33, a people that you do not know will eat what your land and labor produce. Verse 36, the Lord will drive you and the king set over you to a nation unknown to you or your ancestors. Do you see where I'm going with this? Let's see, verse 43, the foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. Verse 49, the Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth. Verse 53, because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you will eat the fruit of the womb, the flesh of the sons and daughters the Lord your God has given you. That's exactly what he says here 1,000 years later. He says, in the midst, your parents will eat their children, and children will eat their parents. They're getting taken to Babylon, which is a foreign nation that is not their own. Do you see that the promises that the Lord makes? What I thought today is I was thinking this thing that I was listening to, and I was thinking, what matters is do you believe the Lord is real, right? Nothing else matters unless you believe the Lord is real. So I'm going to take another one, right? I'm going to go to 1 Kings 8:46. All right, so here we go. This is in 2 Kings. So I'm sorry, 1 Kings. So this is Solomon, which again, we're talking 800 BC, right? So this is several hundred years before this stuff happens. Solomon has built the temple, right? He's the son of David. He has built the temple, and now he's dedicating through prayer the temple, right? So here he says, Lord, the God of Israel, there's no God like you in heaven above or earth below. You keep your covenant of love with those of you who continue wholeheartedly in your way, right? So that's really important. And he says, if only your descendants are careful in all they do to walk before the Lord faithfully, right? And he says, may their eyes be open towards the temple. And then he says, when the heavens are shut up and there is no rain because your people have sinned against you, right? And when they pray toward this place and give them praise, right? They're going to you can turn them back to you, right? When they give you praise, teach them the right way to live and then send rain on the land. When a prayer or plea is made by anyone among your people, be aware of the afflictions of their own heart, right? And then it says, hear from heaven, for you alone know every human heart, so that they will fear you in the time that they live in their land of the ancestors, right? So He wants them to remember, right? That this is when they sin, if they turn back to you. And this is what he's saying again, several hundred years later. So like I said, is the Lord real? Are these people just repeating what they've heard? I'm going to go with no, because they lost these books, right? And so, yes, in the recent past, they've come back to these books, but for the most part, they've lost these books. God is speaking to these people, and he's telling them exactly what he told them 1,000 years before, right? Same people group, different people, same people group, same problems. I'm going to punish you. I'm going to do all these things to you. I'm going to send you guys to a foreign land. When you turn and you seek me, I'm going to bring you back, and I'm going to love you and honor you and lift you back up again, right? This is what the Lord is saying. So is he real? I might not like what he always has to say. I might not want to be punished. How dare a God say that my world is going to be destroyed? Why, if I say that I love him and I believe in him, why wouldn't he give me the lottery, right? Like Bruce Almighty. Why isn't he honoring all of us for our wishes for the lottery? That's not the kind of God he is. But is he God? Right? Is he real? Is he true? And if you answer yes to those questions, how can you do anything but follow him? Right? Like if he made the entire universe, how can you do anything but follow him? And I know that's easy for me to say. It was hard for me to come to that truth, right? And I know it's hard to come to that truth. But I think that we need to wrestle with that, not with whether we like what he says about this or that political situation, right? Not if we like his people. Who cares if you like his people? I don't like all of his people, right? But the reality is, I don't think they all preach truth. I got to be real. Like, we show up at a lot of churches and I'm like, ugh, I think they're missing stuff, right? But God is real. And God has told me I need to be in community with other people who love him and worship him and speak of him, right? Why? To strengthen my faith, to remind me of who he is so I can stay with him. I've gone off on such a crazy tangent. Okay. Because that's what I really wanted you to know. I wanted you to know this is what he's going to do. And this is what he told you 1,000 years before that, right? And so he is true. Then it says, the word of the Lord came to me in verse 6. Son of man, set your face against the mountains. So he's telling him, set your face like you're turning towards the mountains, right? Like, so you're looking at it, you're determinedly looking at the mountains, and say this to the mountains. And I've said this to you guys before, that we are all interconnected. The land is the Lord. The land is the Lord's. The animals are the Lord's. We are the Lord's, and we all are interconnected, and we work with each other in community, right? And he says, say this to the hills and the ravines. I'm about to bring a sword against you. He's talking to the land. He's talking to the mountains, right? Your altars are going to be demolished. Incense altars will be smashed. I'm going to slay your people. The land's people. I'm going to slay your people, Judah, Jerusalem, right? I'm going to lay dead the bodies of the Israelites. Your people will fall slain among you, and you, the land, will know that I'm the Lord. But I'll spare some. Then in the nations, when they have been carried captive, those who escape will remember me, how I have been grieved by their adulterous hearts. Remember how much he hates this. They will loathe themselves for the evil they have done and all their detestable practices. So this is what the Lord says in 11. He says, strike your hands together, stamp your feet, and cry out, alas, because of all the wicked and detestable practices of the people. One who is far away will die of the plague. One who is near will die of the sword. And then some will die of famine. Anyone who's left over is going to die of famine. Then they will know that I'm the Lord. So he kind of like shouts out all of this at the end. Going into 7, he's just preaching disaster. I'm not going to go too much into this. He says, the end is coming. The end is near. Disaster is coming. Prepare yourself. I'm not going to look at you. I'm going to pay you back for all the horrible things that you've done. I'm not going to spare you, right? I'm going to judge you according to your conduct and repay you for all your detestable practices. He says, the day is coming. None of the people will be left. None of that crowd. And then he says, they've blown the trumpet, but no one will go into battle. Outside is the sword, inside are plague and famine. So like, it's coming from every direction, right? You're not even going to be able to like arm up. You're not even going to be able to lift a sword or fight against them. Like they're going to get you from the outside. They're going to get you from the inside. None of that matters. He says, then the people are going to start throwing their money into the streets. And they're going to be like, who cares? Your money is essentially worthless, right? Your money is worthless to me. It says, for the money has caused them to stumble into sin. Remember that. We strive. I am as guilty of it as the next person. I'm not going to tell you I'm not. We strive for money. We need money for this. We need money for that. Oh, but God tells us to be discerning with the way that we spend and share our money, right? Like, I've heard it all. God wants you to be a saver, good. I've heard it all. And I don't want to even take any, I know I rolled my eyes, but I don't want to take anything away. I understand all that. We need to be very, very careful, right? We think it is a solution. It is not a solution, right? It is God's gift to us. Every single thing that we have, every piece of silver or gold that is in front of us, that is on our table and in our bank accounts, is because of the Lord. It's a gift that he has given us, right? And it says they look in pride, right? They look pride at in their beautiful jewelry and used it to make detestable idols. They took pride in their jewelry. So they loved everything they had. Like, oh, look at how amazing this is. And we do that. Like, there's definitely something to that, right? And he says, I will turn my face away from the people, and robbers will desecrate the place. So he is allowing the wicked to come in and take over, and he's going to turn his protection away from his people, and he's going to allow everyone to come in and steal and take everything. And he says, then they're going to go on searching for a vision from the prophet. Priestly instruction in the law will cease. The council of the elders will come to an end. So you're going to search for this, and it's going to be gone. Now, I'm going to say, not knowing for fact, but making a big assumption, it's going to technically still be there, right? Like, they're still going to have a system, because that tradition still stands, right? Even in all of our systems, a lot of those traditions still stand. But what he's saying is, it's not really going to be there, right? Like, you're going to look to them, and that's not going to be there. It's not going to be for the Lord, right? It says the king is going to mourn. And then this is what I wanted to note, because I know I don't tend to go in the future, but I want you to remember this verse. By their own standards, I will judge them. So God is saying, I'm going to judge these people by their own standards. Let's see what that means in the future. Here, he's judging them by what they are not doing right? And he's coming in and he's destroying them. All right, so now we're going to go into Ezekiel 8. So it says, in the 6th year, in the 6th month, while I was sitting in my house, the elders of Judah were sitting before me. I looked and I saw a figure like that of a man. So this is another one of his visions. Sorry, I just shook the camera. This is another one of his visions. So from the waist down, he sees this man and he's like fire. From the waist up, it's sort of like bright, right? So it's a vision. And then this vision kind of takes him up into the nation of Jerusalem. So he's not literally going in there. But remember, he's over in Babylon. So this vision lifts him up and takes him over into Jerusalem. And in this land in Jerusalem, he says, I see this idol of jealousy. Son of man, do you see what they're doing? So he's showing Ezekiel the ways in which the people, like, we have this tendency to call God unfair. And like, I hear people who don't even know God constantly saying, like, your God is awful. Your God does this and your God does that. And I take it, right? Because my God doesn't need defending. But they don't even know, right? Like, they're assuming that their behavior is so good, or that their behavior shouldn't really matter. And if God is God, then none of that should matter. Or we shouldn't get punished for it. Or it's not that bad. That's not a reality. And I always want to say that, because I know that we all have a tendency to think we are not really as bad as we are. And I'm not saying that you should go home and cry yourself to sleep every night and live your whole life in shame, right? I'm not even saying that. I'm not even saying like you should go home and turn your whole life around. Like, if you're out there cursing, swearing, drinking, and partying all night, tomorrow you're going to wake up and never do that again. Step 1 is to recognize that the Lord is real. Step 2 is to turn your face to him. And then he will slowly pick away at those things. These people were not doing that, right? So here's what they were doing. Here's what he sees. He looks in each wall and he starts to see these visions of what they're doing. So he looks in this one wall and God's like, look at this one wall, and there's like a little hole in there. And he says, go and dig in the hole. And in the hole, there's a doorway. And so, and again, I'm sure in these visions, I am sure there's so much depth to these visions that I'm not giving you even a glimpse of. I'm giving you a really high overview. And so he goes in there. And then once he goes in there, there's like all these crawling things and all these like animals that they're not supposed to be eating, right? Unclean animals. And it seems unimportant. I want to say in this time, in this day, in this age with our people, that stuff seems extremely unimportant. It is not. None of those tiny details are unimportant. So if you are doing something that the Lord has asked you not to do, anything, by the way, anything, if you're getting angry at a friend, if you're fighting with a spouse, if you are right, like we can justify all of those things. And God is saying those things are detestable to me, right? So we need to be sure, right, that we're checking in on our hearts on all these things. So what he says is he goes in this room, crawling things and all unclean animals. See how they've turned away from me, right? They're worshiping this, right? And they're mourning over this. They're so sad. They're mourning over this. And then they turn to a different wall, and in the different wall there's women, and women are mourning mourning the god Tammuz. They're sitting there and they're crying over this different god. They're supposed to be God's people, and they're crying over a different god. Then he brings them to the inner court, and he says they're bowing down to the sun. That's not me. I made the sun, and they're bowing down to the sun. And so he said, therefore, I will deal with them in my anger. So just so you know, you can see exactly what these people are doing. So when they come to you in innocence and say, but it wasn't, but I love, but I, right? Ezekiel now has a very clear vision of what the people of Israel are doing and why God would be so angry and why God is going to spend his wrath on this, right? He says, although they shout in my ears, I'm not going to listen to them. Then in chapter 9, the last little section here, it says, I call out to him, and I heard him call out in a loud voice, bring near those who are appointed to execute judgment on the city, each with a weapon in his hand. And I see 6 men coming from the upper gate with a deadly weapon. And then one man was clothed in linen, and he had a writing kit at his side. So again, this is still in his vision, right? So he's still seeing this in his vision. So he sees these warriors with swords, and he sees a guy with a writing instrument. And this guy goes around, and it says, I want to be clear, I want to read this. The Lord called to the man clothed in linen who had a writing kit at his side, and he said to him, go throughout the city of Jerusalem and put a mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over all the detestable things. So anyone who sees, so Ezekiel has just seen what all the people of Israel are doing, right? All the nation of Israel, the entire nation. And he says, anyone who's grieving that, anybody who looks at it and is just devastated by all that's happening, put a mark on their foreheads. I don't know what that mark looks like, but whatever. Put a mark on their foreheads. Again, we're going to see this, by the way, in the future. Put a mark on their foreheads. Those people are going to be safe and protected from the Lord. Anyone who does not have a mark on their forehead are going to die. Anyone who does, which means they're turning their eyes to the Lord, right? He's going to save. And it says, Ezekiel says, while they were killing and I was left alone, I fell face down crying out, Sovereign Lord, are you going to destroy the entire remnant of Israel in this outpouring of your wrath? In verse 5, he answers me and he says, in verse 9, he answers me and says, the sin of the people of Israel and Judah is exceedingly great. It is full of bloodshed. So I will not look on them with pity or spare them, but I will bring them down on their own heads what they have done. They are only getting what they deserve. Then the man in linen with the writing kit at his side brought back word saying, I have done as you have commanded. And so now we see that these people are marked, right? So the ones that have the mark will be safe and protected from the Lord. The ones that do not have the mark will have wrath brought onto them according to the deeds in which they have done. That's where we're ending today, and I am thankful you guys were sticking with me. If this has been a blessing, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. As always, guys, I want you to keep reading. Stick with it. Working through these prophecies. We're going to get there, and you're going to understand the Lord, I promise. And I will see you guys tomorrow.